Hey, what's up, everybody? It is AD from P4CM, and we're glad that you are joining us today. We have a discussion that definitely needs to be had in today's climate, and we have the best person with us today to discuss some of these issues that we're facing, especially on the scale of politics. Today, we have with us Justin Givney. He is one of the founders of the AND Campaign. My brother Justin, welcome. How are you, sir?
AD, what's going on, man? I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Indeed, indeed. Well, before we go into this conversation, I wanted to talk to you really quickly. The AND campaign. The name is dope. I love the name. Do me a favor. Tell me a little bit about the name, and tell me a little bit about what the AND campaign is about.
Yeah, for sure. So when me and the co-founders created the AND campaign, we were addressing what we felt was kind of a false dichotomy or false dilemma that people experience when they were getting into politics. And so what happens to a lot of, especially Christians, when you walk into politics, it almost feels like if you care about justice, then you'll go to the left, right? If you care about compassion and all that stuff, you'll go to the left. But if you care about moral issues, moral order, and Christian convictions, you'll go to the right. And we just didn't think that's how it should be. We thought that the gospel was both compassion and conviction, love and truth, that if you look in the Bible, you see justice combined with moral order, and that those things work together. So the AND campaign was basically saying, we're not going to choose between love and truth. We're not going to choose between justice and morality. We're actually going to choose both, because that's how the Bible and Jesus combine things. And we're not going to fall for this false dilemma that makes us feel like we have to choose one or the other.
Yeah, and I want to ask a question about that. But before I do, one of the other founders, if I'm not mistaken, is Sho Baraka, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so really quick, a quick aside. Just so happened to be listening to the narrative yesterday. That is one of the most balanced and well thought out approaches to today's climate, and it happened in 2016. He wrote that album in 2016. But when you listen to that album, it addresses pretty much everything we're dealing with today. And he has such a well-balanced approach to it. I would encourage people to listen to that album, especially since he's one of the founders of the AND campaign. But you talked about the AND campaign taking kind of a biblical approach to politics. And I know that there are a lot of people out there who struggle with trying to take a biblical approach to politics, because it's hard to see the Bible in a lot of the candidates that we put up, and they want to make a biblical decision, but because there's these other elements, they find it hard to do that. How would you encourage or kind of guide that person when it comes to making a decision biblically as it pertains to politics?
Yeah, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit more later. Your whole public witness as a Christian is not built on who you vote for in one race, right? So one of the things that we tend to do, especially when it comes to national elections, the presidential election, is try to say, whatever you decide on this one vote, that's your public witness. That's who you are, and that's what you represent in politics. And that's just not true. This is one vote. This vote is the end of one process, which was the process of creating agendas and the primary process and deciding who the candidates were going to be. And it's also the beginning of another process, the process of holding candidates accountable. And so I would say that it's, keep in mind that it's not just about who you vote for. It's about the issues that you support as well. The stances you take, how you talk about your opponent, how you talk about your neighbor are huge parts of what your public witness and who you are as a civic being, because as Americans, we are all have a civic duty. Whether we choose to use it or not, it's there. And so I would just keep that in mind. I would start by saying it's not just based on that one vote. You're going to vote in November, you're going to vote for a flawed candidate, regardless of who you vote for. Do the best that you can, but make sure that the positions that you take otherwise are thoughtful as well.
Yeah. And there are a lot of people, like you said, they're both candidates are going to be flawed. There are a lot of people who want to bow out of the process altogether because they see it as choosing a lesser of two evils, right? And so they don't want to choose any evil. And so they say, hey, I'm just not going to participate. What would you say to that person?
I start in the same place to say, look, it's bigger. Your public witness is bigger than just who you vote for in this one time. And you're not responsible for everything that person does thereafter. You need to try to hold them accountable, but you're not necessarily responsible for that. The other thing I would point out is that politics presents us with a huge opportunity to care for our neighbors. Well, at the AND campaign, we really see politics as one way, not the only way, to pursue, that second half of the Great Commandment, which is love your neighbor like yourself. Politics, because it impacts people's lives. I mean, these are matters of life and death. These are matters of people eating, people not eating, a father being in the home or a father being in prison. These are very serious issues. And so because it doesn't fit us perfectly, which we shouldn't expect anything in this world to fit us perfectly, to give up is just giving up too much of an opportunity to help other people, really to protect human dignity and promote human flourishing. So don't put it all on one issue. Don't feel like because I align more so with the Republicans or the Democrats, I'm responsible for everything they do. You're not. You do need to speak up when you disagree, but don't miss the opportunity to help other people. And although politics is imperfect, it touches almost every aspect of society. From what we eat, what's in our food, what's allowed to be in our food, what our children learn at school, and even to whether we can go to church or not, right? We've seen that too. So I think Christians are remiss. I think we're actually bad stewards if we opt out of the process because it's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect, but we can do enough to have a positive impact on people's lives. Don't miss that opportunity.
So you're kind of answering the next question. I live in California. So I'm a deep, deep blue state, and there are, however, conservatives in California, there are Republicans in California, and a lot of those people tend to say, well, why participate in the process? Because my vote really doesn't matter. And that's just not unique to California. That's unique if you're in a red state and you're blue, you kind of might feel the same way. So what would you say to those people who feel like their vote really doesn't matter?
Your vote always matters because number one, it makes a statement on your behalf. Even if you don't want to, too much, we often focus on, is my vote going to help it win? We want to win. And that's a major part of what politics is about. But sometimes it's about the statement. And then also a lot of what goes on in politics is not partisan. So there are disagreements within the Democratic Party on a lot of issues. Your vote could matter there. The other thing I would say is make sure you organize. That's why organizing is so important, because if Democrats in California who are more conservative come together, they come together with other centrists and stuff like that, you can have an impact, and you may push a candidate who might be a Democrat. You may push them further to the right or further to the center because you're speaking up and you're being distinctive in who you are. So you always have to believe the process means something. By your vote, you may be encouraging a group that you don't even know about to step up and be more vocal about what they say. But again, it's not just about that one vote and winning or losing. And there's so many other parts of politics that aren't necessarily partisan that you need to speak up on.
Yeah. And, there's also another element to this is where it's not just the presidential election that we're voting on. There are other more local issues that also have to be addressed, a variety of propositions, city council seats and state senator seats that are up for election during this time. And I wonder if people who are voting are taking that into consideration, given that the climate and all the energy is being pushed towards the presidential election, that they're not focused on what can actually impact them directly in their particular state. And a lot of that has to do with the values that they personally possess and how they use that vote to address that. So how would you kind of encourage a person to focus beyond just the presidential election, and look more into the issues that are relevant to them?
Yeah, pull a ballot. I mean, there are so many other elections that are going on. And the fact of the matter is local elections a lot of times are going to have more of an impact on you. So while you may be going to vote for, one presidential candidate, there are going to be, as you mentioned, other issues that are on the ballot. So pull the ballot and look to see what's on the ballot. Usually you can get your ballot from your Secretary of State, pull it, and you can see what's actually on the ballot and all the issues that you need to touch on. One of the reasons that this is an important question that you ask is because of what's going on with criminal justice and police reform. Well, these elections are very important for that. So it's always interesting to see so many people who say Black Lives Matter and that they care about this stuff. But if you ask them, you know, who their prosecutor was, they probably wouldn't know who their prosecutor was, right? They probably wouldn't know who the judges who might be up for election are. Those are important issues because while we want to change policy, there's always going to be a level of discretion that's given to prosecutors, local prosecutors, and judges. And so you want to have a say on who those people are. And if we don't know them, then we have to question and maybe slow down, you know, and question maybe how serious we are about the conversation. Don't feel bad. There's always time to learn. But if we care about criminal justice, we should care about those criminal justice elections. We should care about our school board elections. We talk about disparities. We talk about how resources flow within communities and how more resources go to one community than another. Well, that has a lot to do with what our school board is saying and what they're voting on. You know, we like to put all those issues on whoever the presidential candidate is. A lot of times those are local issues and local decisions, especially when it comes to education. So we need to be paying attention to those. And again, be aware enough and understand the civic process enough to know that these other elections are coming up and we need to speak on those too. You mentioned referendums. I mean, I know for us in Atlanta, there's a referendum on our water to make sure we keep our water clean, to make sure that water infrastructure is replaced and it's where it needs to be. These are really important. You don't want to wait until you get in a situation like Flint, Michigan or something like that to say, man, I wish people would have helped us out. Or now you're blaming it again on the president when it was really, you know, a local or state issue that we could have taken care of. And I'm not trying to put that on the people of Flint. That's just an example of how we need to step up and get to issues that may be more local.
Right. What are some referendum propositions, topics, issues that are coming up that Christians should be paying attention to in this coming up election cycle?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's hard to say as far as referendums. Usually those are local. And so everybody listening may have some different local issues that are coming up. I don't know. I don't know all of them. But I think as far as issues that matter in general, we certainly should be looking at criminal justice and what our elected officials are saying about criminal justice and how they're going to, you know, reform that system. That's something that's very needed, and it plays a role in conversations about family, conversations about education, and all those things. So those are questions that need to be asked. You know, another issue that's very big, as I'm sure you've seen, is the court, the Supreme Court, and just courts in general. You know, when you elect someone, oftentimes they're going to have a role in saying who the judges are, you know, who's in that other branch, in that judicial branch. We need to be paying attention to that too. I think education is big, but healthcare is another one that's played a major role in the presidential election, and also is going to play a major role in the election of, you know, the Senate and the House. Are people, you know, going to be able to get help when they have pre-existing conditions? These are all issues that Christians should care about. These are issues that I think we have to be compassionate about and make sure that we're asking the right questions and that we know where the people we're voting for stand on those issues.
Yeah. These times have been so polarizing that even in the body of Christ, there's been division because the emphasis has been such on politics that you choose a side, you choose a camp, and then you're going hard for your side. How would you encourage a believer to, I don't know, transcend some of this and really take a biblical approach to politics in general?
Yeah, the AND Campaign talks a lot about this in our book, Compassion and Conviction, that just came out in July. We have to transcend the fray. That doesn't mean that we have to kind of belittle the issues and act like these aren't serious issues that we're addressing, but we cannot just be partisans. We cannot, you know, I always say that a Christian cannot just be a generic Democrat or a generic Republican. We can't just go along with our party or what our ideological tribe says. So the first thing that I think Christians need to do is have a level of separation between themselves and their political party. I'm not one of those people who says that Christians can't be in a political party. I've been in one all my adult life. But I do think your political party should not be your identity. And AD, I think that's what you're kind of getting at, where people even start changing what they believe on moral issues based on what their party is saying or based on what their favorite politician is saying. And that's indoctrination. And we can never, Christians can never allow themselves to be indoctrinated. What indoctrination is it means that you're accepting things without being critical about it, accepting things without questioning it. We see that through the Bible. We see when Daniel was talking to King Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar wanted him to be indoctrinated, right? He wanted him to just go along with whatever he said. And Daniel said, no, I'm not going to defile myself. But it's not frequent enough that Christians take that type of stance against their own political party or against their own ideological tribe to say, no, I will not be defiled. I may agree with you on some things. I may agree with you on most things, but I'm going to stand up and be very clear that when I disagree with you. And one of the exercises that I always suggest that people should do, you should be able to name 5 to 7 things that your party or your ideological tribe gets wrong based on what the Bible says. And if you can't do that, you should be very worried that you've been indoctrinated, because neither of these sides are perfect. That doesn't mean they're equal either. And I don't want to, we don't ever want to get into false equivalency. But as we participate in politics, when we partner with other people, we should know who they are, and we should know where they disagree with us on things that matter when it comes to biblical compassion and conviction.
Yeah. I'm going to go into a direction that's laced with landmines. So feel free to withdraw and say, "Hey, brother, I love you, but I don't want to go there." But as you know, as the world knows, there's been a lot of unrest. There's been a lot of protesting. There's been some degree of violence associated with the protesting as well. And I was listening to a talk show the other day, and they were tying a lot of this anger to critical race theory. They were saying that because of that worldview and that approach, that it engenders this justified anger in African Americans, Black people in America, and it's a normal outflow. The anger and the rage is a normal outflow because of what that theory teaches. I don't want to break down a theory, but what is do you see that correlation at all? I guess is the question.
I've heard that argument. I'm familiar with that narrative, and I think it's a serious mistake in a country that has used race to discriminate against people, has used race to decide whether somebody lives or goes to prison or gets a job for hundreds of years, or whether they were enslaved or whether they got to vote. Right. It is a big mistake to blame critical race theory for rage in a country that has that history. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's still a fairly recent theory. And so to blame, for all the stuff that we have going on, when you see people still getting killed from this racialized violence, to blame it on that theory, I think is a huge mistake. And it's a dismissal of a history that America really needs to own. And so that's the first thing that I would say about it. The second thing I would say about it is I think a lot of white evangelicals who are making, and it's not only white evangelicals, but a lot of white evangelicals are making that argument. They need to take the time to really understand what merit that theory has, right? That it talks a lot about power. It talks about how power is used against those obviously without power, or those who are minorities. And I think it would do good for a lot of people who are saying, speaking on it, to actually look deeper into critical race theory and what it's actually about. That said, I do not believe it's the gospel either. And I think sometimes I think it does have some flaws. I think it's not infallible. And if we follow it like it's a gospel, or we follow it like word for word, like it's going to get us where we need to go, we will be in a position that is not where Christians should be in. Because while critical race theory, I think, has its merits, I think sometimes it can assume too much as well, right? Race tells us a lot, especially in a country, like I said, with the history that we have. Race doesn't tell us everything. And I think sometimes you can get into the position where it's almost as if race tells us everything. And I know you, AD, just by your color. I know what somebody else is going to do based on their color, or I know what they've been through. You don't know you don't necessarily know exactly what somebody's been through. You may know that the system could potentially hold them back in certain ways, but not everybody has been through those same things, right? We probably know people in our life, whether it's our cousins or whatever, who their main issue is they spoiled. You know what I'm saying? And they've held themselves back because they're spoiled. I don't know if there's enough nuance there. So I think it has merits. I think people who are professing, especially Christians, people who are saying this has merit and I want people to learn about it. If you're a Christian, you also need to tell those people where it falls short. And so that's one of my rules. If you're going to say, people should know about critical race theory, great. Tell them what the merits are, but also tell them what the perils are. And that's one thing that you don't see. So that's, my analysis is a very nuanced analysis of it, but people need to learn about it. There's some people who could gain some knowledge from it, but then there's also some people that need to know that it has perils. It is not the gospel. It is not infallible. And so you need to be aware of where it could lead you astray as well.
Yeah, man. This is why I really appreciate the work you guys do at the AND campaign. It's such a balanced approach. It's not, I'm leaning this way, I'm leaning the other way. It's a kingdom mindset, kingdom agenda. I'm focused on, Christ and his glory. However, this is how that knowledge informs my political opinions. And so you can see the flaws on one side, you can see the flaws on the other side, you can see the good on one side, you can see the good on the other side, and you glean from that, where you align yourself politically and say, okay, I'll go this direction. However, I'm very well aware of the flaws that exist in this direction. I think that's a really well-balanced approach. That's why I really appreciate the work you guys do.
I appreciate that, AD, man. It's just a thoughtful approach, right? It's actually just thinking through it. Too often what we do is what Bill Clinton called brain dead politics. And what we do is we choose a side, as you said before, and just go with it and say, hey, wherever they're at, because they're better on my issue that I care about than the other one, I'm just going to go with it. And what the AND campaign is saying is politics is chess, man. We're not playing tic-tac-toe. You can't just give a general okay to one side or the other. As Christians, we have to think through it. And that's really all we're saying. We're not trying to find a squishy middle, right? We're not trying to say, hey, we're going to be in the middle on every single issue. We're not going to really take a side. That does nothing. That hurts nobody. I mean, that helps nobody. Right. What we're saying is we're going to transcend this and we're going to reframe the issues for ourselves, because there are so many issues that are framed wrong that you end up with two wrong answers, right? So if I come up to you, AD, and I say, are you going to proclaim the gospel, or are you gonna fight for justice for your neighbor? Right. You say, or right. You say, well, I want to do both. Right. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Stuff like, are you going to hate your LGBTQ neighbor? Or are you going to affirm them? Mm-hmm. And you say, well, is that the only two options? Right. It might not be the only two options, right? Yeah. Right. Maybe I can love somebody and disagree with somebody. Right. If we don't reframe the issue, then we get forced into an unfaithful position, and Christians really have to take the time to do that.
Yeah. So speaking of taking the time to do that, what resources would you recommend for Christians who are not necessarily plugged in or who are getting kind of tangential information as it pertains to politics, but want to go in a little bit deeper and have a little bit more of a critical thought on these issues? What would you recommend that they look into?
Yeah, and not just to be self-promoting, but this is what the AND campaign does. I mean, we're here. I believe that, we were given the purpose of being a resource for Christians that are asking that exact question. So the first thing I would send people to is our new book, which is Compassion and Conviction. It's the AND campaign's guide to faithful civic engagement. And that's exactly what it does. It reframes the issues for you. It says, look, the gospel does not speak to every issue, but it does give us a framework for how to engage society, for how to engage other people. And within that framework, there's a lot of common ground, which we're trying to find a lot of common ground now, but there's a lot of common ground that the gospel gives us, but then there's also room for us to disagree. So Christians don't have to come down on the same side on every single issue. You and I, AD, could disagree on the marginal tax rate. Well, the Bible doesn't say exactly what the marginal tax rate should be. So within that framework, there's room to disagree. But I think there's some real other issues that we should be in the same ballpark when it comes to criminal justice, and issues like that. So I would first say the book is a great resource. The Church Politics Podcast, where we talk about a lot of political issues from a biblical worldview. I'm going to be straight up with you. The AND campaign has a high view of Scripture. We believe in the Bible. We have a high view of Christology. And so we take that more orthodox point of view, that biblical point of view, and just apply it to the issues as best we can. And I'm sure we don't always get it right, but I think we do have a framework that gives voice to how the gospel would have us engage our neighbor.
Very good. I did not know about the podcast, so expect a new subscriber very soon. I'll be doing that because I love podcasts and I have a very long commute, so it's perfect for me. I appreciate you being here with us today, Justin. It's been a very enlightening conversation. I appreciate what you guys do at the AND campaign, and I pray that more people get exposed to you and to your organization so that they are more informed on these issues. And it's not just during an election cycle that you guys are available as a resource. It's anytime, because you guys, I'm sure, have things to say as it pertains to local politics as well. And so if you're not following the AND campaign, please make sure you are doing that. What are your social media handles, Justin?
So you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at AND campaign, at AND campaign. You can go to our website and contact us at andcampaign.org. You can email us at engage@andcampaign.org. Again, we just want to be a resource for believers and churches that are trying to deal with these issues. We want you to be more than just a partisan, to be a Christian in this moment, because that's really what the moment needs.
Amen. This is exactly what we need. And we pray more people get informed about you and about the AND campaign. This is AD with P4CM. Thank you guys for joining us for this conversation. I'm glad you guys are here and watching. Please make sure that you share this conversation with your friends, your network, and like it as well. We'd love to hear your comments. So wherever there's a space for you to leave comments, put them there. And we'd like to hear your thoughts on this as well. Again, this is AD with P4CM with Justin Giboney from the AND campaign. Thank you guys, and God bless.